Welcome to Cal-Am Lifestyle University acrylic painting class. My name is Deb Kannenberg. Today we're going to be painting a dream catcher. I'm going to start by using the largest brush that I have, and it doesn't matter how big it is, by just wetting my canvas down a little bit with some plain water, just to open the pores of that canvas a little bit. And I'm going to start, I want my background to be some blues and greens and whites. So I put some, on my palette, I put the 3 blues. They are cobalt blue, phthalo blue, and cerulean green. And to that, I'm going to add some white. And again, I'm going to take my largest brush, and I'm going to start with my darkest blue, and I'm going to pull just a little bit out, and then I'm going to add some white, and I'm going to pull that out until I get the blue that I want. And then I am just going to start doing my entire canvas with that blue. I'm not going to worry too much about covering the whole, making sure that it's completely covered. I'm going to have some white holes. You might want to add a little water to thin your paint down. That'll help cover those little white spots that could bleed through your canvas. I'm just going to paint, and I want it to be kind of different colors because it's going to be a varied background. So if a little of the darker blue gets in there, that's okay. I'm going to start to blend some more of my blues until I get the background that I'm looking for. Add a little water. I don't want to make it too wet because I don't want it to take too long to dry. Because before we go to our next step, this will have to be completely dry. I'm just going to pull my blues together, mix them up. And you can go vertical or horizontal with this, whatever you like. If you want to go horizontal, you'll have a little bit more of a horizontal look. Whatever you like. You can do both if you like. Kind of changed midstream here and went vertical, horizontal, but that's okay. If you have paints left from the kit, if you purchase the kit, these are the paints that I'm using at this point. I may switch and use some other paints, but you can use whatever you have, as long as they're the acrylic paints. Let it be a varied blues. I want this to have some blues. I'm going to be adding some more whites. This is just kind of my base coat. And before it gets too dry, I'm going to add some of the other colors that I want on this painting. I'm going to add some crimson. some scarlet. And I need a little more white. Okay, I'm going to take my big brush again, and it's got some, I had it in the water, so I'm going to pull some water. And I'm going to pull some white and a little bit of the crimson and the scarlet. I don't want it to be too, and I'm just going to add some highlights going across. Give it a kind of, just to give it some reddish colors. Doesn't take much, so don't use too much. And if you do, get some more blues in there. You can always go over it when it dries. I want it a little more muted, so I'm going to add a little water to my brush. Mute it around a little bit. I'm going to add some whites. I want it to be a little more grays in there. I'm using kind of a dirty white, mixing it with some other colors. And again, use some water if you want to get too wet. But background to be a little lighter, so I'm incorporating in some more white. You can mix a little raw umber with your white to make it a little more tan, or you can use a medium or a dark titanium white. Blend a little more blue in there just till I get the background that I want. Now you may want your background just to be solid. Backgrounds are a total individual taste. And I'm pretty happy with that, so I'm going to leave it right there. I may mute it a little bit more with some water. You could swirl this if you wanted. I think I'm going to leave mine just kind of going back and forth. And I'm going to leave that dry. Okay, moving forward to my palette, I've added some raw umber, some orange, some yellow, some kind of the greens, and some black. And I'm going to, at this point, I want to start and make the base to my dream catcher. And I found a paper plate that I think is about the right size. Now I can put it in the center and have my feathers hanging down. I can put it on the side and have my feathers going out. It's really personal preference. So for this one, I'm going to put my dream catcher in the center, and I'm going to let my feathers go off the page. I'm going to put my dream catcher right there. So after I draw my plate in, or my circle for my dream catcher, I know that it's going to be wide, so I'm going to have an inner circle. And you can draw this or you don't have to draw it. And then you're going to have all your center, little center circle. And then you're going to have, however you want to do your dream catcher, there's a million different kinds. I'm going to do mine on the simple side. From here, I'm going to make half circles coming down. And I can adjust these. If I don't like them. I'm going to do something like that. And then coming down to the second one, I'm going to come off at each one of those points and make a V. And this is you can do all kinds of designs with these. Use your imagination. I'm keeping mine rather simple. Oops, this goes to here. This goes to here. Kind of like that. And this will be kind of like a rope coming around with little knots. Will make that come around to make that. So that would be the center of my dream catcher. And then I may want to just put some loopy strings in here. Just some loopy little strings falling down. Some loopy little things. And then from in there, I'm going to bring my feathers down. And I'm just going to draw light of just a and I may want one feather coming off the page here, something like that. And I may make these a little straighter. I know, because they're hanging, there's no wind in my picture, so I might want this a little straighter. And so that's the basics of how we're going to get started with our dream catcher. The first thing I'm going to do is I've added colors to my palette, and I'm going to take one of my thinner brushes, and I like to soak mine in water so they're a little wet. And I'm going to take probably, mine are so full of paint it's hard to read. I believe this is a number 8. So I'm going to use this, it's a round brush, and I'm going to use that number 8. And I'm going to take a little black, and I'm going to mix it with a little bit of the tan or white, just to get kind of a gray, a dark gray. And I'm going to start to paint my lines. So I'm going to start with the outer line of my dream catcher. And this is just a base coat. I'm going to come around that circle that I drew with the plate as my guide. And I'm just going to draw my circle. I'm going to make it a little bit thick because this will be thick. And dream catchers are usually wrapped with a twine or a rope or something, so there could be some other colors in there. So I may want to add a little bit of greens and just blend in a little bit on that circle. And I'm not really liking the greens, so I may pull in some blues. Just do it how you like it. Make it so it kind of looks like threads, or so use kind of short strokes. I like the blues better than the greens. If I think they're getting a little too light, or if I want to mix a little green in with that blue. Blend your colors and have fun with blending the colors and getting them to be what you like. And then you can take your brush when it's rather dry and stroke it a little bit like it is hairs coming around or threads coming around. So it's not so defined. So it peeks over the edge a little bit like threads might. And I'm going to come back with just a little black to give it a little shadows. And then I'm going to start painting my inside lines. And I am going to make my inside lines pretty black. And I'm going to try a smaller brush for that. I'm going to take the other round brush, the smallest round brush that came with your kit, or this one I believe is a number, it's really hard to tell. I think it's a number 4, but it's a pretty small round brush. And again, I've had it in the water, and when I put it in my paints, I don't know if you can see, I like to twirl it a little bit so that I get a nice point on it. And I'm going to start with the inner circle because I like to rest my hand a little bit. And remember, these chalk lines, we'll get rid of them later. So I like this line to be a little thinner. And if your paint is too thick, add a little water. So you want to be able to get that nice line. And then once you get that, then you can start coming out with your other lines. There we go. So once we have all those lines in, now I want to take my same brush and I want to make it more grays. I want to make it more of a dark gray. I have a little too much water in my brush. So I'm going to take some white and a little raw umber and a little bit of black. And I'm going to come up with a nice dark gray. And I want to mute these lines, and I want my brush to be rather dry. I want to mute these lines in here. that there's shadows in there. So I'll pull them with the gray. And again, my brush is fairly dry. I don't have a lot of paint on my brush. I'm just pulling out in between them, making it kind of dark around the circle. Put a little more gray in here. I don't want that to be. Almost fuzzy looking. I'm going to go kind of around, really dry brush all of these. A little dark, a little gray, so they're not so defined. So they look more thready and not so worn, maybe like a yarn that's starting to fray a little bit. Very light, just kind of filling in that it's not so stark. And I'm going to do that to all of these. I want them to be, especially in my V's here, kind of light. Around my make them look a little whimsical. And once I'm happy with that, I'm going to go and I'm going to add some color, a little bit, to my inner ring. And I kind of like that blues. A little bit of greens, kind of turquoisey. And I'm just going to add a little color to my inner. Not much, just a little. Now I'm going to take these lighter little feathery loopy things that I put on here. I'm going to make them a little bit gray. I'm going to make some gray. I don't want them to be real pronounced. I want them to be kind of whimsical. So I'm just going to come down and put another one in the center there. Whimsical. We can define those a little bit more as we go along. I like that blue-green, so I might come over them again with a little bit of the blue-green. And just because I want them to have a real fine definitive, I'm going to take my black and I'm going to just give them a little bit, just not even the whole thing. But I want them to definitely look like they're coming from the ring. So I'm definitely going to pull them up to that. And then just like I did before, I'm going to take some gray, very dry brush. I'm going to take most of the paint off my brush, and I'm going to give them some shadows in here. It's a little light. Just so it doesn't look like so it has some shadow coming off of there. Then I'm going to come down and I'm going to work on my feathers. I just have a piece of scratch cardboard here and I'm going to practice making my feathers. So I've mixed up some teal blue, a little bit of green, a little bit of blue, a little bit of dark blue, and that's kind of the color I want. Maybe a little more green in my thing so it has a little more contrast. I'm going to get most of the paint out of my brush, and I'm going to come down with kind of a straight line on the side of my brush like a feather would have. And then I'm going to start coming down the sides of my feather very lightly. Very, very lightly. It gets narrower towards the bottom, so I'm going to do it that way. And then there's a little few wispies on the top. I'm going to put a couple of those in. And now I'm going to start adding some color to my feather. And I'd like to have it be a little darker and maybe towards the center. So I'm going to take a little more blue. And I'm going to come down that center again. Just very little paint on my brush. And feathers kind of come out and down. A little more up in here. And then I think I'd like to have a little orange in my feather, so I'm going to pull a little orange. Again, very light, and I'm not cleaning out my brush. I might wipe it out a little. I'm going to start very little with some orange in the center of my feather. And pull it down towards the center and maybe a little up in here. Give it some brightness. And I kind of like the way that's looking. Feathers are usually tipped in black. So I'm going to take some black and I'm just going to tip the ends in black a little bit. Bit up here. And I think that's how I'm going to be doing my feathers. I'm trying to zoom in on that so you can get an idea of the colors a little bit. It's pretty hard to zoom in. So that's pretty much how I'm going to be doing my feathers. I hope that helps you. Let's get going on making our feathers. Very light and dry first, and then just keep adding till you get what you're looking for. Start with that vein down the center of the feather and always make it darker towards the middle. Pull in the colors till you get what you like. You can have a lot of fun with these. you think your brush is getting a little too dark, then take another brush where you can add some light highlights. And then don't be afraid to add a little black. A lot of times feathers are tipped in black. You have lots of fun with your feathers. You can pull as many feathers in as you like. I like that green. And a turquoisey green. Be sure your brush is dry. We'll start a second one here. My first coat on this feather is very sporadic, dry. I'm going to make this one a little rounder. And then I can fill in my colors as I go along. I'm going to add some orange into this one. Again, make sure your brush is dry. moving forward, I've taken a little black, a little blue, and a little green, and I've painted in the ribbons or the lines down to my feathers. I've also added just a little note on top where it would be tied. Just to show that would be tied. Just pull them, I kind of pulled them more straight down than they were when I drew them. And again, to get rid of my chalk lines, just a clean brush, a little water, and those chalk lines will just disappear. So it's always a good idea to draw them in chalk first, because you can see exactly where you want them to go and you can change them. I've also added, I'm going to add some beads to my painting. And I'm going to add a bead at each joint where the circles meet the ring. I'm just going to add a little red elongated bead. I'm using scarlet. One bead there. And I'm also going to put one bead at the top of each feather. And they're kind of, think of the shape of a bead. I'm using a round brush. Whatever brush you're comfortable with will work. Just making them the shape of a bead. And when they dry, I'm going to come along with a little white on the very tip of my brush, and I'm just going to add on the long beads a little line for a highlight. And on each one of these beads, just a little dot to give it a little highlight. Where the light might be reflecting the bead. I'm going to add just a few little highlights around my ring. You can see I've done that here on the top here where I might see some light. A little bit of red in my brush, which I really didn't want. Add a few highlights up in there. Add a few highlights in your feathers if you'd like. These are kind of the finishing touches. Take back and take a look at your painting. See where you might like some highlights. Don't overthink it. Put a few black highlights on the bottom here. This would be the darker side. This would be the lighter side where the light hits. And a few little wispies. These wispies would go all the way around, but they would kind of be underneath. Just a couple little shadows under there. Don't forget to sign your painting. I hope you enjoyed the painting class today, and we'll see you next month.